And we've got some great pictures here of them just approaching that start line. What happens now, Josh? What are these guys going to do in these sort of last minutes up to the start?
Well, the athletes will be they'll have just de-kitted. The kit will have gone into the launch. The nerves will be starting to rise, and just as you go through the bridge, sort of the bow pair will be sort of starting to get really on it, because it's very important, because we're doing a freestanding start here, so that we have sort of as best alignment as possible. With trilates and fixtures, it's always a bit dodgy. Okay, we're about to start.
And we heard in the umpires briefing earlier, which happens for all of the athletes taking part, Richard Phelps umpiring this particular race. He said that Alan French, who's the coach of the Oxford University Boat Club Women, will be getting those crews into alignment. He wants to make it as fair as possible off the start. You can see both coxes there, just wanting to get things straight and ready. And Zoe, as a cox, what do you look for at this moment in time?
The other crew's hand, so whether they're ready or not, and also my own alignment and my own crew's readiness. And I want to see a sort of relaxation in them, so they're not too tense and they're ready to go, basically.
And Josh, as an athlete in these moments, what are you thinking about?
Getting the first 5 strokes off. It's so important, just to make sure that you get off and then you get into a good rhythm. And that rhythm is then going to set you up for the rest of the race. So yeah, it's getting the first 5 strokes off nice and cleanly and together. It's very important.
And we don't have too bad conditions, almost near perfect conditions, I would say, for the tideway. When we heard from Annie earlier, who is used to racing on the tideway, should take this weather any day. Any prep here in terms of the blades?
Just getting them in the water and being ready when the man says go.
It's as simple as that, Zoe. As simple as that. We just heard the voice of Richard Phelps there, calling these crews to attention, and off we go. The start of the season, really, for Oxford University Boat Club, and we're kicking off here with the women's trilates. It looks like a great start here initially, Josh, for Remus.
Yeah, Remus. Well, both crews seem to have got off quite well, but I think on the left-hand side of the screen at the moment, Remus looking a little bit cleaner. Yeah, with although Romulus might be starting to take an early lead.
I think Romulus had actually a more aggressive start. It was untidy. Remus did look, like you said, Josh, much tidier, but Romulus actually really aggressive underwater, a little bit inefficient, but they've come together quite early, and actually I would say it looks like maybe just Romulus.
Yeah, and they're just about to come in front of our commentary position here. So if we take a quick peek out of the window of London Rowing Club, I think we will just about see Romulus with the narrowest of margins. And we'd expect from that side of the river, right? This is where the advantage starts to kick in for that station.
Yeah, so they'll have a little bit of advantage early on. They'll have probably about a quarter to a third of a length as they go round that first bend, round by Fulham Football Club. And you've got to really capitalise on that, because what comes next is a big advantage for the Surrey station, so for the Remus crew. So you've got to put yourself out there and make sure that you take advantage.
Yeah, the Surrey crew, so the crew on the left-hand side, once you get sort of past that Hammersmith bend, well, carrying up to Harrods and then the Hammersmith Bridge, you have a big chunk of the middle of the race where the river is in your advantage. You have the corner. So the crew on Middlesex is going to want to get out, sort of put their cards down on the table and go, yeah, here we go, we're taking control of the race. And in the stern pair, we've got a very experienced stern pair of Annie Anazakis and Julia Lindsay, both of whom rode in the 2022 boat race, and coming out of retirement this year. The rumour was they lost the bet with Matthew Holland to come out of retirement, but now the crews are coming together, and it's a bit of a clash between 2-seat and 3-seat.
So at the moment, I'd say I'd probably be happier being Joe Gellert in that Remus crew. He's put his crew ahead early on, actually, despite the fact that it is Romulus's bend. He is being warned, we can hear by the umpire, but he looks to be responding to that quite nice and smoothly. to give his crew that continued advantage.
And Zoe, you just saw a little peek there from Joe Gellert, taking a little look over his shoulder. From your experience, when you've got a crew kind of coming in, do you stay put for as long as you can and hold your line, or do you try and respond to give your crew the cleanest water?
I mean, you could ask 2012 me that question and now me that question, and we'd give you different answers. You've got to be responsive to the umpire. Ultimately, even if you think you're in the right place, what they say goes, and that's the final line. So you've got to make sure that you are showing that you're responding. And actually, I think now they've moved over a little bit more, and they have opened the door a little bit for Romulus to use their advantage and come back a little bit.
So Josh, you're currently sitting in the Romulus crew. You've got the last of your bend and last of your advantage coming up now. What are this crew thinking? What are they doing to try and get back on terms with Remus?
Just staying in the rhythm, because as soon as once your advantage is gone, if you're in that rhythm and you're staying with the crew, you know that you're moving faster because you're going around the outside of the bend. So that yes, it's a long advantage, but as soon as that advantage ends, around sort of at the end of the Surrey bend, you're then going to start to take off. So just sitting in that rhythm, staying calm, staying composed, just making sure that sort of you're not letting, because this is won in inches, sort of inch by inch each stroke, and just not letting that go.
I think what's really interesting to see at the moment is they are matching stroke for stroke on the race, so they're taking exactly the same amount of strokes per minute. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see the more efficient crew is going to be the crew that puts themselves ahead.
Now, both of you, we've got a new coach that's just taken over in September, Alan French, who's got lots of experience coaching women's crews at Oxford Brookes University, a little spell away coaching more school-age children, and now back in the frame in Oxfordshire. How different is it coaching boat race crews? What do you think he said to these eights ahead of going out? We've just seen they're completely matching each other on the rate. Do you think that's intentional?
Possibly. I think he's done a good job of picking matched crews for starters. This is a good race. They are both right up there. Romulus have kind of used their early advantage. They've stayed in the game. They're competitive, clearly. It does take a while, I think most coaches would say, to get used to the boat race. And if you talk to Sean, who's obviously been doing this for years and years, he would say he lost his first few races. He was learning how to master a boat race on the Tideway. Alan's a great guy. I rode with him at Oxford Brookes, and I'm sure he's a good student of the sport. He'll have gone out and really done his research.
Yeah, it's a very niche event. There is nothing quite like it on the rowing calendar. You've got Henley, but that's only over just over 2k. This is such a different event to anything else you do. So yeah, as Zoe said, it takes time to learn the craft.
Well, look at this. As Zoe quite rightly said, I think coming in and I mean, it's the same every season, right? You get a new set of athletes trying to assess in just 3 months, where you're at, where your benchmark is, what the match crews might look like. But this is a really fantastic race. Barely, I'd say, quarter of a length separating these two crews at this moment in time.
Yeah, so apparently in training, in all the pieces that they've been doing, the crews have been really well matched, which is what we're seeing here in the race.
I think they're making this 35 look really long and strong as well. I think Alan's put a real stamp and a marker of his kind of technical model on this crew in such a short space of time. They're both rowing so efficiently.
Yeah, long, powerful strokes is what moves a boat, and we see both crews are doing that really well here.
If you see this shot here, it really shows you how closely matched they are, and this is now really the start of that advantage for Remus. So the Remus crew has got to use it, and if I was coxing that boat, I would be telling them, look, this is it, this is where we start to move. If I was in the Romulus crew, I'd be saying, look guys, we're holding them around the outside of the bend, we can do this, we can win this race.
Yeah, the crew's converging again ever so slightly as they pit themselves for that famous marker around Hammersmith Bridge. I think this is the point where a lot of people who maybe don't know as much about the boat race, this is the portion of the race that they have heard about, aiming for that lamppost on the bridge, aiming for that line with the stream. How hard do you think these crews are going to fight for that particular line?
Well, going round the bend, because you get such an advantage from being on that sort of the inside. I can see Romulus perhaps not wanting to go too wide sort of under Hammersmith, sort of as we come out from underneath Hammersmith Bridge, and you can see now Tara is starting to turn in on Remus, trying to hold that position and put pressure onto Joe Gellett.
And we spoke a little bit during the crew lineup, Zoe, about the Coxes. Both have got a blue boat under their belt. You know, Joe and Tara in 23, Joe in 22. How important is trial-8s for a Cox to demonstrate their kind of mastery of the course and really try and get their elbows out in claiming that seat?
Yeah, it's massive, and you've got to be really careful, I think, as a Cox, because you don't want to be so aggressive that you scare the coaches or the athletes or the umpire. More importantly, you want the umpire to see you as someone that that can be trusted, but equally you've got to get your crew out into the best possible position and make sure they get a clean race and you get the best out of them.
In 2021, for example, at trial-8s, Jack Totham was coxing my crew, and it was like this coming under Hammersmith Bridge. It was neck and neck. I think I was in the 7th seat and I was clashing with James Forward in the bow seat, and Jack pulled something which you're not technically allowed to do, which is where we started to get ahead. You're meant to have a length of clear water and be moving away before you're allowed to come across. But Jack started to sort of push across and really put pressure on the other crew. And I can remember seeing from the stern, as we could have crossed in front of them, their bow surged one side of our stern, and as we went across it then surged the other side of our stern, so it missed it by a matter of inches. And I said to Jack at the end of the race, if that was ever a claim on the blue boat seat, that was it. And he ended up getting the seat for that season.
And look at this for a race, guys. We've got almost a bow ball for bow ball race going around this huge sweeping Surrey bend. And actually, I think personally, and maybe both of you can correct me, but if I was in the Romulus crew right now, I'd be feeling pretty confident.
Yeah, so I mean, in my 2012 race, we were pretty much in this position at this point in the race. We were bang level pretty much around the outside of the bend, and the last call of any decent nature that I made to my crew was, we're level, they've used up most of their bend, we're going to win this race. And I hope that that's what Tara is saying to her crew now. And it is interesting because as I looked at them go off the start, I thought Remus looked much more efficient, they looked tidier, and actually despite that early lead from Romulus, I thought, no, if Remus settle into this rhythm, they're going to move away quite quickly. But Romulus have entirely proven that wrong, and they've really kept that pressure on.
And we talked about the really experienced stern pair in the crew from Romulus. We've got Annie Zarkis in the stroke seat, backed up by Julia Lindsay. And Josh, you were talking about how, that combination itself is quite a big statement to have in stern pair.
Well, yeah, they've in fact won trial-8s before with Joe Gellett coxing them. So they've now an opposite crews with this matchup. But it looks as though Romulus is starting to just inch ahead, even on the outside of the bend.
It's just a little bouncing around back and forth between the crews, crews being warned, coming in, coming out, and you want to try and give your crew a nice clean run, so you don't want to be, getting too close, and actually they're really coming in tight here, so a test for the Coxes to make sure that they can keep their crew straight and out of trouble, and if there is any clashing, make sure they get out of it with the best possible rhythm.
Is there anything to be said, guys, about sort of almost intentionally trying to give the crews a bit of experience with blade clashing? Because ultimately, come race day, right, there's no control over the other crew. At least there's a little bit of control here, both in-house. It's both Oxford crews. But come the race, would you want to have a little bit of experience of clashing oars so that you know how to adapt in that situation?
I think very much so, because a clash can make or break your race, to be honest. And we see in trial-8s, in fixtures, there are lots of opportunities to sort of practice this. It's not something that you will go, Sean or sort of the new coach Alan will go, right, okay, today we're going to go out and practice clashing for an entire session. But in the build-up for trial-8s and then in fixtures, it's good fun, just trying to take chunks out of your teammates on and off, sort of off on the water.
I think the thing is, though, it's something that you want it to come to you. You don't want to be causing the clash. You want your opposition to be causing the clash and you row out of it in the best possible way.
Well, I think now as we return to the race, we're 12 minutes in, so over halfway at this point. And looks like Romulus continue to push on, and they've only got their own advantage left to come. So do you think at this point Remus are starting to break down a little bit? Is there anything that you can see that I guess tells us the state of play in the Remus boat?
Still think they look strong, actually, and they still have a tiny bit of advantage left, so it's going to have to be on them to make use of it and then really hold on hard. Romulus look, they still look a bit tighter to me. I would say, the quality of rowing from the outside looks better in Remus, but at the moment Romulus must just be putting down that power and making these strokes much more efficient. So if they can hold on to that, they should, they should have a bit of clear water here and a bit of more of their advantage coming.
So they've just got to hang on with that overlap, and again, I'm sure Cox, Joe Gellert on the left-hand side of your picture will be keeping his crew up to date. We've already talked about President Ella Stadler in the 7 seat, who accepted who posed the challenge to Cambridge just over a month ago at the President's Challenge in London. Now, having the President in your crew, is that something that gives you a little boost of confidence? Is that something that, again, is, I guess, for the crew to pull together and have that sort of lead figure in your crew?
Not necessarily, because the President is there for the club as a whole. I've had it in the past where I've had the President in my boat and we've gone on and lost in trial-8, so it's not a guarantee.
As I say, it sounds like Romulus are being quite strongly warned there by the umpire, Richard Phelps. It looks like they tried to pull that a little bit of getting a little bit of an advantage and then pushing Remus around, and that hasn't flown so far. So they need to just be careful now not to get themselves into any trouble that could end up in a disqualification or a crab or a clash that doesn't go their way.
And Zoe, just looking at the position on the river, you've done this course hundreds and hundreds of times. What can you say about the positions that both Romulus and Remus are taking on the river at the moment?
I mean, I think they're both in a really good position, and when the water's nice like this, you don't have to worry about the wind, you don't have to worry about the waves, you can just concentrate on where the stream is fastest, and both these coxes, being former bluebird coxes, will know that, so you can tell that they know exactly where they will be.
So we are about to come back around the bend and into sight of the finish line, and it's, I think, getting more and more positive here for the crew. Romulus on the right hand side of your picture. Now I think we have seen Trial 8's crews come back and actually overturn a result from this point in the race, Josh. We've had some really cracking ones over the last few years. What do you think Remus need to do now as a crew to try and get themselves back onto terms?
Throw the kitchen sink at it. They're coming up to the bandstand, which is about 5 minutes left in the race, and normally the crew that gets to Barnes Bridge first will be the crew that wins. That's the stat for sort of the actual race. However, in Trial 8s, in the reserve races, you tend to see you can see that stat overturned a bit. And if the sort of the crew leading has spent too much to get themselves in that position, then the other crew has the door open for them, essentially.
And I think that's exactly what happened. I think Romulus has slightly opened the door here for Remus, and Remus have just carried on in that really predictable, strong rhythm. And actually, like you say, it probably is coming up to time to throw the kitchen sink at it. You don't want to go too soon, but obviously you don't want to leave it too late. And I think at the moment it looks like they might have timed this quite well, potentially.
Well, do you know what? I think Romulus were on the outside of that big sweeping bend, the big Sawyer bend, which is exactly why when the coin toss happened, Remus won it. They went for the inside of that big bend. Romulus have spent a lot of energy trying to get that psychological advantage around the bend, and just as we're saying that now, I think there's a slight advantage coming back to Romulus. Are Remus going to kind of load up like a spring and try and chuck it all out in this final sprint?
Yeah, from Barnes Bridge it becomes a drag race. I've done fixtures and Trial 8s where if you've still got overlap, it's not over. It's very much not over.
Well, it looks like I don't think there's been too much of a response on the rating from either crews yet. And again, I don't know what Coach Alan French has said to them about whether they are going for a full race plan. You know, is it common that you try and execute a full race plan like you would on boat race day?
Absolutely. When it comes to Trial 8, it is, as I said earlier, it is your opportunity to practice what you're going to do on race day. And even if you're 10 lengths ahead, even if you've only got half a length, you are going to throw absolutely everything at it until the finish line.
Obviously with the proviso that it is relatively early in the season, so there is still some fitness to come. And I do think now Romulus have actually made that rate change that you were talking about, Camilla. You know, they have decided, right, let's go, we've hung around here too long, and now they are starting to move away once again.
Yeah, and I think we must remember Remus on the left-hand side of the picture. We just saw some great shots there of the stroke seat. Sarah Marshall only started rowing in 2019, only 4 years of rowing experience underneath her belt. Quite a challenging position, the stroke seat, to be in. It often requires a lot of race experience to know how the crew feels, to know how to respond. And you can just see that they are ever so slightly lower on the rating than Romulus are at the moment.
Well, yeah, and I think coming into the final stages, it is hard to raise that rate because you've spent so much early on, and so you're hanging on right until the last minute. I remember in my final year, we were coming under Barnes Bridge, and I had the two guys behind me screaming for more, and I had nothing.
And I think that this is going to be the case here with Romulus. I think cutting that elastic band, you know, they've held for so long, Remus. They've kept it in the game. They've put up a bit of a fight, but I think as soon as that clear water gap starts to become very noticeable, Romulus have taken every opportunity to jump on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they got to that, you know, they got to the bow ball and they decided this is it, we go now. But actually I think, you know, this race is potentially going to be won by maybe a length, 2 lengths at most, but I think that is going to sort of slightly belittle how close the race actually was. And I really do think, even at Barnes Bridge, that could still potentially could have gone the other way.
No, I think that the result on paper maybe won't be so reflective of what an amazing race we've had between both Romulus and Remus here for the Oxford Women's Cruise. Here come Remus now. I think this is that kitchen sink moment you're talking about, Josh.
Yeah, the kitchen sink has been thrown in. They are putting absolutely everything they've got, just even if it's just to close the margin down. But yeah, regardless, I think it's been a fantastic race. The athletes will have lots to take away from this, but when you've spent 3/4 of the race pretty much bow ball for bow ball, that is excellent race experience for the athletes to then take away, reflect on, and then bring that into the fixtures.
And I think you can see the pain on the faces there of the crew from Romulus, but it will all feel so much sweeter as they come into view of Chiswick Bridge and of Tideway Scullers School, where the post is that denotes the finish of the boat race is going to be just over 20 minutes in terms of finishing time. We've had some stunning conditions, as we've said, but remembering that these are matched crews, so the time a little bit slower than maybe we'd expect from race day, from the course record day. We've had a little bit of a headwind, I think, as well, but still, nonetheless, it will be a great victory here for Romulus in the white tops as they come into sight of the finish line. Now, I think in terms of what's next for these athletes here, for these 18 athletes contesting in Trial 8, what happens now from today? Is anything kind of taken from this? Is there any statistics? Is there any seat racing? Like, what's the next step after Trial 8?
Well, so you can see on the riggers there's sort of a little bit of tape, and that indicates that there's telemetry on the boats. So the coaches will go away, they'll have a look at the telemetry, they might review the footage from today as well, and then after the Christmas break they go into training camp, and that's when the crews start to take shape.